House, I welcome you to what is the 11th Grand Campus Tourney debate of the 177th session of the Literary and Scientific Society. Now, since the Easter break, we have had 4 new competitors to the Grand Campus Tourney. First, we had the English Society, who are looking to turn their dreams of winning the Divinity Cup into a reality, a matter of fact and fiction. Then we had the Bar Society, who most certainly raised the bar high in terms of the level of competition, living up to their name. After that, we had the Motorsports Club, who looked to race into pole position in the competition. And now finally we are joined with the Alt Society. We're very pleased to welcome you all here, and we are sure that you'll be welcoming us to your parade if you do win the trophy tonight. Very kindly, the humble creator of the Divinity Cup has joined us tonight, which brings me on to President's Questions. This is your chance as members of the House to ask me, your President, any questions you might come up with. But of course, there are 2 important caveats. You can ask no questions of my politics, and there to be no questions about my sex life or lack thereof. So, do we have any President's questions? Yes, Emily?
Mr. President, what did you have for breakfast today?
So, for breakfast today, to get into the theme, I decided to have a mohawk steak. It's like a tomahawk steak, only it's served with Alton pepper. And then I also drank my own tears from the football result at the weekend, as unfortunately my Stockholm syndrome is not doing well at the moment. Do we have any other President's questions? Yes, Captain?
What is your favourite emo band and song?
My favourite emo band? This will probably tell you the extent to which, or really like the lack of depth I have in terms of what's defined as an emo band, because you may disagree, but I used to love listening to Fall Out Boy and Panic at the Disco, if they count. Yeah. Any other President's questions? Yes, Maya?
What's your favorite colour?
My favourite colour is turquoise.
Also, another question, is this your first time doing your hair like that?
It is not. I know the last time I did it, I'm still fighting that lawsuit of the person's eye I jabbed with my very spiky mohawk, but no, it's not the first time. Well, it may look like it from this kind of structure. Yes, Emily?
Did Becky play with Rachel do your hair?
They actually didn't. I did it in the toilets of the Great Hall about 10 minutes ago, if you can't tell. But they did refuse to do my eyeshadow. However, I'm so committed to the bit that instead, to have black around my eyes, I just decided to pull an all-nighter to look like. Yes?
Mr. President, do you wish to apologise for that abomination of a haircut?
Not at all. In fact, if anything, I should apologise to myself for exposing my hairline or that girl. Any other President's questions? Yes, Owen?
What's your opinion on triangles as a shape?
Wait, I wonder why you ask that question.
I don't know.
Yeah. No, I love triangles.
I think they're the best shape.
I think they're the best shape.
This needs to be a bit.
This house, well, I mean, we can extend that motion to the floor. This house believes triangles are the best shape. Do we have a second? Or? Captain seconds, okay. All those in favour of triangles being the best shape, raise your hands now, please. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then all those against? Wow, I can't believe it.
Hexagons!
That's 4. And then finally all those who wish to abstain. There we go, so the motion passes, and Mark can get hexagon with that time. Any other President's questions? This is your last chance, folks. Come on, do you have any burning questions to ask me? Everyone once? Yes, everyone.
Considering it's I believe your last time actually presiding, what's the President's questions that you always wanted to be asked that you never were asked?
Oh,
Good reflection.
that one. So, I love it. I love to be asked. It is a good question. Maybe a bit more about. I feel like there's a lot of hobbies that I have that you haven't really touched on, or my takes on music and musicals and whatnot. So you could, that's maybe the encouragement to ask me more questions about that. Appropriately, I saw Mark had his hand up earlier, so this may change what he asks. Yes, Mark?
on a similar vein, but not related to your answer, if you had to put a motion forward to the House, what would it be?
Just any motion. Oh. You're really asking the hard questions tonight. Yeah. I put forward this. I mean, I was involved in the creation of the term card this year, and I do always quite like the sports motions. But I would probably put forward an open-ended motion like this house regret or this house believes, because I feel like that could be quite interesting to do. Any other President's questions? Yes, Emily?
Mr. President, what is your favourite alternative band?
My favourite alternative band? Can you give me an example of alternative band?
I don't know, Cure, maybe?
Oh yeah, no, I do like the Cure. Yeah, I think they're great. Any other President's questions? Yes?
Mr. President, going on your answer from Owen's question, if you had to write an essay about any musical, what would it be?
I could quite comfortably write an essay on the first musical I ever seen, which inspired my love for musicals. My dad was a member of, you're getting old lore now, my dad was a member of the Port Rush Musical Theatre Society, so he brought me along to Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat, so I could probably write quite a bit about that. I also love Hairspray. I lived in the Holy Lands for 2 years. Good Morning Baltimore always played in my head, you know. There's the meth lab that exploded next door. There's the Holy Land Spar. Someone's done the wing mirrors of that car. You know, all the classic things I would walk past, you know, on my way to campus. So probably those musicals. Any? Yeah, okay, Mark, sure, go for it.
This one was just making Mark questions, but can you name every colour of Joseph's cloak?
Red, yellow, green, brown, orange, black, ochre, peach, ruby, violet, gold. I don't, yeah, that's the extent. And I know it ends with blue. Thanks, guys. I know I'm moved all the options, but I try my best. Any other President's questions? Yes, Calvin?
Was there any motion on the current part this year that you wish you could have spoken on?
Oh, that's a great question. Probably, I'm glad with how this motion went, but as someone who has lived exclusively with women for the past 3 years, this house believes men and women can be friends would be the one that I would speak on, which is a motion that I find myself feeling a lot with my curious family members. Any other President's questions? Yes, Mark?
Going on the last conversation I had with Maris there, what is your opinion on Ride the Cyclone?
What's my opinion on Ride the Cyclone? Now, I am not actually aware of what that is. So my knowledge, look, you can enlighten me, feel free to enlighten me, but my knowledge of riding the cyclone is going to Barry's in Port Rush and riding that cyclone instead. And it is Barry's, by the way, not Barry's. Let's make that very clear. But I don't know, I'm willing to be enlightened on riding the cyclone. Any other President's questions? Yes, Owen?
Using the membership of the Litterific as a base, what musical would you have the general membership do? What do you think that they do well?
Oh, so like all of us are musical.
Imagine someone's throwing on you to put on this show.
When you build this show.
What do you think would best fit?
It's happening in a week.
Yes.
We need people who are interested in politics and capable of butchering songs based on history, as our karaoke night proved. So I'm saying Hamilton, that is what we're going to do. There you go. There's a social for you to organise with. You did work for yourself there. Any other President's questions? Yes, Ray?
Do you think you've been a good president?
Do I think what?
You've been a good and fair president?
I mean, I like to be humble, so I would ask you that question. I'd like to think I tried my best. Any other President's questions? Yes?
Will you be going to the Cure concert on the 28th of June?
I am not planning to. However, now that it's, I mean, with Ticketmaster, there's probably no chance of me getting a ticket now, is there?
Probably not. But like in September, I think.
Fair enough. But look, as a boy, I won't cry about it. Any other? Yes, Emily?
If you could be any character in any musical, what would you be?
If I could be any character in any musical, I would be These are amazing questions. We've really, expanded the scope of knowledge of musicals. I'm going to say I would be the landlord of Les Mis, because he seems to have a great time. And as president, you couldn't fair me as master of the house in the way. Any other president's questions? Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Sir President, sir, have you ever seen the Book of Mormon musical?
I have. I think it's class. And my parents have as well, which is great because they always reference it. I'll be walking into the kitchen and my dad will be like, hello, my name is it's great. Any other president's questions? Yes, Owen?
Do you have any interesting stories about the Mormons in town?
I have an interesting story in that when I went to the conversazione last year, the taxi driver heard us talking about the Christian Union and we were all wearing suits and assumed that we were all Mormons. Which, it's not the worst thing I've been mistaken for. I remember going to Spoons with a purple tie on and someone thought I was a UKIP politician. He was facing roundabouts. Yes, Mark.
Mr. President, given on the current trends of my TikTok for you page, would you storm a Scientology building?
Yes, I've been seeing these as well. It looks like great crack. Yeah. It's a pity. Is there a Scientology building in Belfast?
Los Angeles.
There's one,
There's one in London.
there's one meant to be, you know where Good Vibrations is? It's meant to be there. It's registered on Google. That's Scientology.
But you know what we could do instead, as a kind of knockoff, we could storm the hub and see how far we can get. Because you have their own kind of civilization there. I know some of you have worked on the front line of kind of invading the hub cafe, and I think we can go further. Yes, Owen?
I think the closest thing we have culturally here to a Scientology building would be an Orange Hall. So the question is, in regards to storm buildings, are you in?
I feel like it would be significantly less interesting if we storm the Scientology building. It's like, we found a bass drum. This is great. Any other president's questions? I'll take one more. Yes?
What's your favourite ride in bars?
My favourite ride in Barry's. They got rid of my favourite ride in Barry's. It was the Big Dipper. Yes, and they need to sort that out, okay? This house would bring back the Big Dipper. Okay, yeah, so we'll finish with you two, starting with Mark.
I was just agreeing with you. Bring back the Big Dipper.
Yes.
Mr. President, have you ever been to Disneyland, either Paris or America? And if so, what is your favourite ride?
I've never been to any form of Disneyland, but I have been to Legoland, which is... I had a big lanyard on, and I collected all the different, because you get little kind of things for your lanyard at each of the different restaurants, and I had a great time, and that was only a few months ago. Any other? But yes, with that, I suppose we'll move on to our private members business, which is a chance for you all to raise anything you've seen in the news recently, anything in particular interests you, and gauge the rest of the House's opinions on it. So, do we have any private members business in the House tonight? Yes, Emily.
So, I know in the space of the alternative society here today, what's everyone's opinions on Robert Smith and the Cure keeping poor prices down and regards to other big artists keeping their prices quite high, especially with Olivia Rodrigo in her recent tours, or tours that are coming up in the near future. I just want to know people's opinions.
Thank you. Any thoughts on that? Yes, Mark?
As a Calvin man, I feel I'm obliged to say, let's go, we love cheaper shit.
Any other points? Yes, Thomas?
Well, as someone who's going to the concert, I'm a big fan, especially in comparison to the My Chemical Romance ones, which were skyrocketing their prices. I think it was 600.
Yeah, that's brutal. Yes, so
This is slightly unrelated, but I actually know a fellow whose name is Robert Smith, and the funniest thing is he would fit less in with the alternative side and would fit more in the hub, funnily enough.
maybe it's a Smith thing, because I think John Smith wouldn't even how to do this as well, or Joseph Smith for that matter. Any other points on that? Yes, Owen?
We talked last time about the price about the sausage rolls at the town, and now they've actually raised by £1, which is another outrage.
What?
Yes, they were £5. They're £6 now.
The £6?
Yes.
That's disgusting.
Anyone on this shocking revelation? Yes, Tom.
Well, you see, this is supply and demand. The market has priced the sausage rolls higher in the valuation, and that's completely fair and the prerogative of any private business to raise the prices based on the demand. So I fully support this move by the Mosaic Cafe and look forward to the further actions that they may do, including the menu.
Thank you, Tom. Yes.
We dominate moratoriously to flood upon this house, and we will not stand for this supply side, what we call buzzword economics. This house in its entirety stands for cheap sausage rolls and against your principles.
I must say, sausage rolls haven't caused this much political discourse since the Brexit nativity scene. Yes, Tom?
Well, if I may respond, you must understand that it's the right of every private business to do as they would like, to leave them alone. You don't want government to control everything. That brings socialism and the evil associated with it. We must allow private business to run its course.
Sorry guys, I'm getting the middle of your day.
And to contribute to this love triangle, Emily?
As someone who does frequent like the cafe captaincy because the coffee is really good, guys. And I've never tried the sausage roll, but I'm like £6 is quite a lot for a sausage roll. Especially someone who like kind of measures sausage rolls by how much Frank's charging them for them. Especially because I have constant use of the break meal to go back to the south for my family. I do think £6 is quite a lot. However, Mosaic is really good, and if anyone hasn't tried it, I would recommend it. It is really good, guys, and it won't try to convert you. Well, it is captaincy, to be fair, but also they won't try and actively try and convert you. Like, look at Matthew Sprout, for example. Matthew isn't converted yet, and he's been given a private tour of facilities by the resident chaplain. So, guys, I think we're in the clear, so just come and try it.
Not yet.
I'm still speaking, Tom. I just think, guys, come and try them like Rocky Road. The Rocky Road is really good, and the brownies are really good. The baked goods are just really good in general. Just come try the coffee and the baked goods, and I promise we won't try and convert you.
That's very convincing. Yes, historically, that has always been the solid argument. Yes, Louise.
It's not true that they won't try to convert you. An atheist friend of mine went there, and they ate the sausage roll, and they woke up 12 hours later in a bathtub full of frozen holy water, with it dripping down their forehead, and it was too late. So don't believe this. The church is trying to bury this once again. Catholic chaplains seem to be exposed one day. That's all I'm saying.
It all starts with a single sausage roll. Yes, Erin?
I can confirm with what Em says. Number one, they haven't converted me, I'm still an atheist.
Yes.
Number two, the Rocky Road is amazing. But number three, they need to get the Junction vegan sausage rolls because they are much better. I don't know if Catherine agrees with me. The mushroom and the spinach, the Junction, the chickpeas, the spice, it's top tier. I can't say anything to the actual meat sausage rolls, I wouldn't dare touch them. But
Thank you. I must chime in with, haven't you people ever heard of closing the goddamn door? Yes, Catherine.
I do prefer the Mosaic sausage roll, I must admit. It's a relish. But I will say, the soup is really good. So if you're ever planning to get some soup, it's probably around the same price as the admittedly quite extortionate sausage rolls. It's really worth it, I recommend.
Thank you. Yes, Ray?
Yeah, so we're repeating the same thing that we went over last week again, which is the sausage rolls, the fucking soup, and also the conversion as well. By the way, someone did get converted last year. Another Jew got converted last year to, and now she's a real bitch.
Thank you. Yes, Tom?
I just want to thank every member of this house for successfully filibustering this debate meeting to turn it into a Catholic chaplaincy advertisement. I'm fully supportive and I thank the members for their efforts.
Yes. And on that, Becker has his hand up.
Another thing is the Coca-Cola, which they inject coconut and lime into. And I think that's just fantastic. And you know, I hope that that specific drink converts many people, as it did me, because it's banging juice. It's really good.
It would appear that like the Senate room has fallen victim to like the Hop Inquisition. Like what is going on? Yeah, so
just 2 points. Number one, the reason why Tom is so glad at filibuster is because he doesn't have a speech written. Number two, I forgot that I was going to respond to this.
Yes.
I don't know if anybody's tried sandwich with pesto from the Mosaic Cafe. It's delicious.
Nice. Yes, Mark?
It's kind of outdated by now because so many people have spoken, but avoiding the cult recruitment Emily and all the rest of them are trying to do. Shut up, you fucking nerds.
I didn't speak.
Emily, is that your point?
Yeah.
Oh, right, okay. Emily?
I just moving on from like chaplaincy, like food, not everyone's into that. Even though it is really good, guys, we won't try and convert you. I just want to know, like, everyone's opinions on, like, I suppose, like, Susie and the Banshees is a very like, alternative like, band. It's something I would have grown up with with really like goth parents, even though the like name is kind of rooted in the kind of like, questionable like culture. Like, it took away from like Native American like tribe. I just want to know like what's like people's like opinion on like kind of the early alternative kind of goth like bands. If anyone has an opinion on that.
Yeah, thank you. Opinions on early alternative goth bands? Anyone?
I believe that a lot of them are kind of worshipped, obviously, in the alternative community. I dabble in and out of some of their music, here Susie and the Banshees. I pirate them. I pirate all of my music. I recommend that if you want to avoid supporting some dodgy people, Melanie Martinez, for example. You know, I highly recommend Piracy is awesome, guys. If you meet a guy, come to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to have your hand up as well.
Oh yeah. Well, I really like CBC and the Banshees, despite some questionable policies they had. But they made up for that, you know. Like, she may or may not have worn a swastika and supported Hitler, but she apologised it by making the song Israel.
Exactly.
I have no clue what's going on, but I am finding it thoroughly entertaining. Yes, Mark?
I'm the same as Mr. President, I have no clue what the hell is going on, but on the point of piracy, as someone who is known within my friends as being the supplier of suspicious links, as much as I hate Reddit, it is a good place for piracy!
This is the second time that piracy has been endorsed. just for legal disclaimer, we do not endorse piracy.
I do.
Officially. Any other points on that? Yes?
And using Chrome actually automatically block origins.
We're gonna have so much fun editing the audio for this. It's just gonna be elevator music the whole time. Yes.
I said, it's not even the first vision, we've already seen the first wall in the propositions case. Because you speak about not supporting, suspicious people, but in this very society, which is your engagement, I've met some of those suspicious and most just absurd and downright weird individuals. So.
Oh, and Becker's right there. Like, yes, Emily?
I feel like fundamentally there's like a lot in like alternative subculture that is a bit like but I feel like also within the society there's a little bit like okay, I do see I recommend you to like understand your like beliefs, etc. But also I feel like I don't know, there's like a lot of people within like alternative subculture that I grew up with, like I grew up listening to the Smiths and I don't know, like is anyone gonna willingly support like Morrissey? Is anyone gonna willingly like stand up independent? I don't know.
Yeah, that's how we said we had the art from the artist, one of the debates
Exactly.
we had earlier this year. And I suppose I'll close with, do we have any hands up to finish on that? I'll go with Mark and then Louise can have it.
Again, on my common theme of ignoring the current talk, back up piracy, reddit.com/or/piracy. /wiki, /wiki friends. The best place ever! And also, do we really care about Baker's feelings? No.
And then to wrap up with private members' business, the last of the unconsented section.
Well, I mean, I was going to introduce a new topic. I was going to say, for those of us in this room that actually like read the news, does anyone have any opinions on the hantavirus outbreak on the cruise ship?
Oh, interesting. Yes, we'll take these 2 points on that. One.
No.
Very short rules. Emily?
So like basically I read the Guardian article on this, and I think they were kind of framing it as kind of like, I don't know, in my opinion they were framing it as like kind of like a coronavirus kind of adjacent thing, but it's also like, I don't know, I don't think it's going to be like a global kind of like crisis. I think we just need to be very vigilant as like people and also as like uni students, because like I know at the start of the year there's like the whole kind of like worry about like the virus spreading, and I don't think like if it was still like uni term, I think like people would be like, government would be kind of like, telling people, oh, be vigilant of this virus that happened on a cruise ship. I think because we're kind of coming to the end, a lot of unis have already finished and unis are starting to finish. I think people are going to be like, oh, we don't need to worry, but we really do need to be really careful about like public hygiene.
Yeah. Thank you. And then I'll take Becca's point on cruise.
When I said that I was doing a biology degree many years ago, people laughed at me and said, Baker, that's not a real science. Well, in the words of Nigel Farage, who's laughing now?
Thank you for justifying your life choices in the biologist. And then finally, Owen.
Just to back up on this point, because just left the room now. I think that it's a perfect example of a trend you see a lot, and that is just people, especially in the media, always trying to sensationalize and always trying to be like, oh my god, it's I detest it, and you sure you saw it in COVID, sure it's COVID actually, but I swear every like at least twice a year there's some case of some virus breaking out somewhere, especially in cruise ships. It's like a slur going out of the top of my head, and I just understand, you know, I think it's 3 people died actually, it's actually, so that's one thing. But these things will pass, and we'll be worried about new virus in 6 months' time.
Thank you. And then since you started it,
I'm not sure if you've like read about it, but are you like for real not worried about a virus which people have said, oh, it might not become as big of a pandemic specifically because it kills its hosts too quickly? You're not worried about that mutating or anything at all? I mean, I guess it's a survival of the fittest situation. Like, you're not worried about it. Maybe if you don't believe in it, it can't hurt you.
Excess population.
Well, yes, Tom.
Well, you see, this surplus population.
Okay, and that concludes our private members' business. Now on to the main reason you're all here tonight, the spectacle, which is our debate. To remind you all of the motion that is this House believes alternative culture is inherently political, and as always we start with the vote on prior opinion, which is just your thoughts on the motion walking into the room tonight. So can I have all those who agree with that statement, that the alternative culture is inherently political, to raise their hands down, please. Ten? Yep. And can I have all those who disagree with that statement to raise their hands now, please. Two? Yes, okay. And finally, can I have all those who wish to abstain from the vote on prior opinion to raise their hands now, please. That's 3. Mr. Secretary, can I have the results from the vote on prior opinion, please?
Yes, so 10 votes for the proposition, 2 votes for the opposition, and 3 abstentions. The proposition carries and the motion passes.
And now before we get started, a quick rundown of the rules. Speakers will take it in turns on the proposition and the opposition to approach the podium and deliver 7-minute speeches. The first minute of their speech and the last minute of their speech is protected time, which means there's 5 minutes in between them unprotected time, as signified by our bell, Mr. Secretary. Thank you. During those 5 minutes, they are susceptible to POIs or points of information. This is a chance for their adversaries at the other side of the table, or indeed any member of the House, to challenge them in real time on their points. To offer a POI, please raise your hand up high and shout on that point, point of information, or POI, is then the speaker's discretion to accept or decline your point of information. Please make sure to keep these points short, a maximum of 15 seconds, and leave 15 seconds in between each POI being offered, otherwise it's something called barking. And don't worry, my trusty gavel will be able to keep you right. And with that, to start our debates and open the case for the proposition, I would like to invite Ari to the podium, please.
Forgive me, this is the first time I'm doing this without a laptop. I got so full of my laptop. Anyway, greetings, goth schools and grunge go-getters. I stand in front of you all to discuss the motion alternative culture is inherently political. Sure isn't everything political nowadays? Yes. But hang on to yourselves, because I intend to prove that alternative culture is intrinsically entwined, stitched into politics, just like the patches that we lovingly sew onto our favourite jackets. Also, hang on to yourselves is one of the first of many David Bowie references that I'm going to have in my speech, so look out for those. If you get all of them, I might buy you a pint. Also, those bad-eared of you did hear me. I said we. Because although I don't dress as wonderfully as you divas in the room, I am alt. No, I don't listen to My Chemical Romance or hang out in voodoo, but I do have an abundance of black cats and a spider tattoo, which I hope my fellow cooks will graciously accept as my qualifications to speak here. Because at its core, alternative culture just means to be just means to be different to the norm. And if me not being able to sit properly in a chair or having a clear phone case means that I'm alternative, then sure, I guess. Anyway, but yes, at one point I did say I was a goth, and I'm about to utter a phrase that we never want to admit. It was just a phase. But look, Becky, the moon has phases, and it's just as beautiful as us humans. I digress. Despite my own degree being in it, anthropologists find the idea of culture difficult to define. It comes from Latin colere, which means to cultivate, and in the 1950s there was identified over 150 definitions of culture. If we take Daddy Erickson's definition, culture refers to the acquired cognitive and symbolic aspect of existence. Alternative culture just means the culture is different to what is traditional in society, what's the majority, and what most people accept. And no matter how much we want to live in the moonish daydream, if leaders running the world had their way, they would be delighted if we all behaved like sheep. It would be a hell of a lot easier to control if we were all the same. And why do you think these regimes in North Korea and Russia work so well? It's because everyone is identical. Values that were important to the nations are enshrined in their law, taught to their children, and forced through propaganda, media, and speech. The message is clear. Difference is not tolerated. You should all walk the same, talk the same, be the same. If you don't, all we have to do is send a handy-dandy message through a walkie-talkie, and suddenly Auntie Linda, who was saying that the regime is ashes to ashes and full of sorrow, is now no longer coming home to the dinner table. Also, the dinner table doesn't exist anymore, because you and your family are also being shipped to a detention facility, which never been seen again, which proves that you're part of the problem because you were associating with her. Do you see the issue here? Not only does Auntie Linda not know how to keep her mouth shut, but we all know where these incidences come from. We do, for the most part, live in a largely democratic society, thank Mother Nature, which means that I'm allowed to critique the government as much as I like. But you can't tell me that the government could, they would. They're already trying to crack down on protests and make them legal as it is. And this proves that we're putting the government under pressure. Not only are all different in their own right, which makes them political, but we've always been actively engaged in political events and protests. Like seagulls outside McDonald's, we encircle any political events, protecting, attacking, and just trying to get a bite out of the action. Where there are protests, alternative people will be there, especially when the protests come with a strong government critique and a demand for equal rights. The first Pride event, Stonewall, is a great example of this. Our heroes, Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, marched in protest. A protest because we're marginalised and our difference has been viewed as unnatural. Our existence is rebellion, and it's been erased, repressed, and crushed for centuries. It's thanks to alternative people who helped change the laws and whose fault will they had to allow today's gays to have some hope. And if you strip it down to a base level, it was alternative peaks who helped us achieve the most basic of civil rights, such as universal suffrage. In Suffragette City, these women were alternative. Yeah, I see. You get it. These views were not known according to those in charge. This could be repeated with many other pioneers whose ideas were initially viewed as absurd. And look, I haven't even got to this anti-capitalist, anti-communist rhetoric that's portrayed by these queens. It's something that I myself partake in.
You are?
Yeah.
If something can be both anti-capitalist and anti-communist, how can you argue that it's inherently political if it can be transposed onto two, like, objectively diametrically opposed ideologies and stay the same?
You're good, but I said anti-consumerist. Anti-capitalist, anti-consumerist.
Sorry.
Yeah, so we have this anti-capitalist and anti-consumerist rhetoric because all the young dudes now reject this overconsumption because we create our own clothes, we mend the rips and tears, and we create our clothes to fit us. We have an innate understanding of the exploitation of labour, and these clothes, adorned patches, have become a part of our image because in creating our own clothes and buying clothes second-hand, we reject this anti-capitalist argument that's become a part of our society. To end my argument, I want to touch on the music that has shaped us and how this is political. Last weekend, I went to a fundraiser concert to participate in field work, if you will. The concert was the epitome of alternative culture, with bands clad in metal studs and hair in bloody colours. Not only was it alt, but it was also political. For one thing, the proceeds went to the pride, and at the end of the set, one of the singers proudly announced his support for Palestine and denounced the police force. Music is a part of alternative culture, and it provides a platform for them to discuss politics. Our music unites people despite other differences such as religion. With the Belfast punk scene in the 1970s, what emerged was a safe space, a community for both Catholics and Protestants. Alternative culture and music is what unifies the two sides. They find a commonality despite these differences, dancing in the streets with music. This is what anthropology puts emphasis on. This is political, inherently political, might add at that. I've been continuously referencing Bowie throughout this speech, and I'll explain why. He was an OG, an inspiration for so much of the alternative rock that we now know and love, such as Nirvana, The Cure, and the Nine Inch Nails. Yes, Emily, The Cure. He challenged the cultural and gender politics that held up so much of the nation's values. And if you've watched the famous interview, my favourite thing about him is that he showed that shoes have no gender. So, to all the blue-haired liberals in the room, which is most of us inside, I hear my call. Our alternative culture is political. Do we always want it to be? Likely not. But regardless, we must rise to what's been put on us. We must continue to fight what is before us. Our armour, the leather, our weapons, the words. We may be political, but we can choose our own narrative. Turn and face the strange. Vote proposition. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric, for that very fine speech. And now to the case the opposition, I'd like to invite Catherine to the podium, please.
Don't worry, Eric, you won't be able to use my phone. I'm only using it because I was told I'm too short for the laptop, so I'll try my best. Hello, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, the many spouses of Jared Way, shippers of Brevard alike. I hope you've all had a lovely day. Do forgive my maybe short speech. I'm sure I'm not the only one who's been a bit cooked by essays. Paper, can you stop recording? Thanks. The proposition has and will give you many brilliant arguments in favour of this motion, and I truly cannot wait to hear the rest of the speeches from the alt society today. However, the crux of today's debate lies in one single word: inherently. For the proposition to win tonight, they need to prove that alternative culture is contingent on the political nature of those who represent it. In other words, they need to prove that alternative culture cannot exist without politics, that every action an alternative person takes when engaging with alternative culture is political, no matter what it is or who you are. The opposition today argue that it most certainly can, because to disregard the non-political features of alternative culture eliminates key drivers of the culture as a whole, who involve themselves deeply in alternative art, music, and the community. For my first point, we must remind ourselves that alternative is not one subculture with defined rules on how you must act or how you must behave. There is no strict monolith with a defined rulebook to be an alternative. Rather, it is an umbrella term to describe any alternative lifestyle. There are hundreds of subcultures under this umbrella, many of which will be expanded on by my colleagues in the opposition. But the simple fact is, your commitment to this lifestyle exists on a spectrum. It can be full commitment, involving lifestyle changes as refusing to engage with societal institutions. But this can also include small things like fashion choices. They're both still engaging with parts of alternative culture. You see this spectrum in any culture, for example, really. Irish culture. One person may simply wear a cladding to show their culture, while another person may be an actual practicing Irish pagan. Both are participating in the culture, regardless of how far they go. We often see people who engage with just alternative fashion or music today. We've all seen those people on platforms like TikTok and Instagram who have adopted the goth, emo, and grunge aesthetics purely for the love of the look, when though they are just dressing this way because they think it looks good. They are still partaking in alternative culture without politics. However, this isn't just an online phenomenon like the proposition may potentially want you to believe. This does occur in real life. In fact, when I first wanted to be goth many, many years ago, I had a goth friend at the time, and I asked him, what does it take to be a goth? And his answer was that, it is the music which really matters most. So, are these political opinions actually a requirement? Are many socialists alternative? Yes, but must you be a socialist to be alternative? Certainly not. Must you simply align yourself with the left-wing movements such as the pro-choice movement? But even though there are many Christian or Muslim goths, take Peter Murphy, Lycée de Bois as an example. He is a Muslim. These religious goths would not associate themselves with these movements and yet still engage and take part in alternative culture. In the same way that being left-wing does not automatically make you part of an alternative culture, you must also engage with the alternative fashion, alternative music to truly be part of the culture. But yes, I do hear you cry. These people who only engage in the fashion music are just posers. They're posers. They aren't actually alternative. But I believe that is the fundamental flaw, potential flaw in the proposition Gish. Because to follow this logic and to accept the premise that alternative culture is inherently and unavoidably political, and anyone who is not political and who only dabbles in music or the fashion is simply just a poser, then we may have to inform some of the biggest alternative icons of history that they are in fact not alternative. For example, Robert Smith of The Cure, one of the most famous goth bands and an icon in his own right, loved by a lot. And I do credit Robert Smith for being one of my inspirations back in the day. I think he looked awesome. I think his music is awesome. But Robert Smith himself said once, I'm uncomfortable with politicized musicians. Is he a poser? Maybe, but I don't think so. I don't think a lot of people would think so. I think he is truly goth, and I've lost my space. Okay. And this isn't a one-case thing. There are many, many examples of goth and alternative bands about politicized music. So you see the Banshees, as we regrettably discussed earlier, Sisters of Mercy, My Bloody Valentine, and more and more. Their music is a form of aesthetic expression rather than a political one. But this does not make them posers. So why would it make anyone else who's similar just lacking in the fame of poser? It seems all quite hypocritical. So where do we draw the line? Do we accept that the proposition's argument in this culture that without engaging in the politics is completely fine, accepting that it is not inherently political, or do we accept the opposite? What the proposition is arguing to come to terms with the hypocrisy, the picking and choosing of who is required to follow the politics of alternative culture. For these reasons, I beg you to oppose.
Thank you, Gavin, for that very fine speech. And now to continue the case in the proposition, I'd like to invite Kate to the podium, please.
What the hell are these people talking about? Is what a lot of you might be thinking right now. If you're probably thinking this if you're unfamiliar with the alternative community. You might consider yourself to fit into the norm or be mainstream, but it's likely that parts of this culture sneak into your everyday life without your knowledge, regardless of whether you agree with alternative values or not. And additionally, I feel this is my first time writing a speech on top of these readings, so you better read with me. Anyways, moving on. Thankfully, I'm here to help explain why exactly alternative culture is inherently political. Cambridge Dictionary defines the word alternative as being something that's different from someone else, which is essentially the same thing as nonconformity. And it's almost as if that's the most important key value of being alternative. That doesn't just mean dressing differently, however, or though. It means a whole plethora of other things. It's actually a pretty hot topic online, pun unintended, which is honestly rather stupid if you ask me, when looking into where the alternative community originates from. Whether you're punk, goth, emo, scene, metalhead, or whatever you label yourself as, there is no denying that your personal style came from a place of political defiance. Now, what even is alternative culture? Music might be the first thing that comes to your mind. And you're right. Fashion, lifestyle, and especially politics are a huge part of the alternative way of life. These tend to overlap quite a bit, so I'm only going to touch on this briefly. The alternative scene itself derives from music based upon political resistance, mainly themes of anti-establishment and activism. Bands like the Sex Pistols and the Clash, with their songs like Anarchy in the UK, God Save the Queen, Clampdown, and White Riot, were popular in the 70s to 80s, which heavily relied on themes of anti-racism, anti-fascism, and rejecting the system. With the growth of the punk movement in Britain, a lot of these bands took part in campaigns such as Rock Against Racism. Eventually, the movement would eventually split into different subcultures, which obviously I touched on a second ago, but still retained its political focus in its origin. You can say these are more modern bands, like Green Day and Nirvana still follow the politicized footsteps of whence they came from, and their songs like American Idiot and Rape Me, if you've ever heard that song, it's a great song, listen to it. Personally, I think it's a bit hard to look me in the eye right now and tell me that alternative culture isn't inherently political when some of the world's most iconic rock bands do nothing but embody such a thing through their art. The visual side of being alternative equally follows the same suit. Those who choose to present themselves in such a way act as a figurehead or a visual representation of resistance and defiance of the system by not following the expected beauty standards that set and mold us by society. And this is especially a common feature in punk women's history. Developing in the 90s, the feminist riot girl movement emerged as a way for women to resist standards set by the patriarchy, building a community of politically progressive and fearless women, allowing them to express themselves and break free from the tight standard that was put on women at the time, and still is, on how they were supposed to look and what they're supposed to talk about. Because we all know that anything to do with women has to be political all the time, considering men can't handle a woman who speaks for herself, which is ironic because I'm actually doing that right now. These bands were fully politicized in nature thanks to deriving from the punk scene, bringing awareness to women's issues about periods, sexual violence, misogyny, and promoting solidarity between women to resist the system. Another example of this kind of feminist side of punk is, outside of Western media, would be Yaru girls who fit under the alternative umbrella. Looking at you, Mars. Yaru also emerged in the 70s around the same time as the punk kind of movement as a form of rebellion against Japanese purity culture and harsh beauty standards that were put on women. However, I won't touch on that much because I don't have the time to dive deeper into it, but I think it's a good point to look into if you're interested. Now that we're all on the same page, I think that it is rather obvious that alternative culture itself is inherently political, especially in its origin. Despite the modern perception of what it is now, and that the opposition may argue that it has lost its politicized features, or as some different subcultures don't tend to retain much of a focus on politics as some would, like punk and goth, and are more based around the music and fashion of it. The reason it exists in the first place comes from that history of political defiance, making its existence inherently political in nature, regardless of whether it still embodies those values or not. Thank you, that was quite short.
Thank you, Kate, for that very fine speech. I'm going to continue the case to the opposition. I'd like to invite Owen to the podium, please.
And so, encourage members of the House and our fellow travellers in the Queen's Alternative Society, I'd just like to begin this by welcoming you all to the Literary and Scientific Society. I believe, I was talking to Calvin earlier, this used to be the main building. We used to hold all the bits until about 2024, I believe. So we'll get started in this now. The motion today, this House believes alternative culture is inherently political. What the proposition has to do here is prove, in my eyes, two things. Prove the usage of the term inherently and political. Now, The opposition, we're very qualified. Tom and I, most of all. And in no way were our various attires made up by Emily and all in the past 3.5 hours. But with alternative culture, in my understanding, is that it is far too broad. It is something that has no real pointed direction. It has no real pointed goals as a massive subgroup into itself. So being able to say that alternative culture is inherently political is something I just can't agree with, because it just means so much to so many. And if it is inherently political, in what way? What is the purpose of this alternative policy? What do they seek to do? Second thing is political. We all operate under our own, assumptions of what word mean, various words mean. And it's times like these that really allow us to consolidate what it is we ascribe to terms. So I'm actually also going to bring in the Cambridge Dictionary. Politics is the activities of the government, members of lawmaking organizations, or people who try to influence the way a country is governed. In my eyes, I cannot see any real attempts by any alternative, I'll get to your word, by any alternative movement to enforce any meaningful policy change from the perspective of actual objectives. Sure, there's things, but that isn't political, because it isn't trying to ensure the way the country is governed. That's just having an opinion which isn't inherently political. So I'll move on here to the difference between intent and, actually yes, go ahead.
Okay, so would you deem yourself political? And is that how would you oppose this notion? Because I suppose alternative culture is part of art, and art is inherently political. So how could you oppose that if you yourself are very political?
Well, art is inherently political, and my politics are a different notion. So intent versus interpretation. The way we interpret certain pieces of media may be a completely different way to which they were intended to be created. Through no fault of my own, in previous speeches, I have accidentally brought an interpretation in some people's minds of being deeply sectarian, deeply Republican. I don't know where that came from. That certainly was not my intent. So I'm going to go through with you 6 phrases. I'm not going to tell you which is which, but one is a set of Nirvana lyrics, and one is actual political quotes. First one, education, education, education. Number 2, a mulatto, an albino, a mosquito, my libido. Politics is wars like bloodshed, war is politics like bloodshed. It's okay to eat fish because they don't have any feelings. I did not have sexual relations with that woman. She eyes me like a Pisces when I'm awake. So in that we see 2 sets of I treat Nirvana as a because from my understanding there's no wider meaning. It is just words from what I know from friends who are really up to a long extent actually these past few years. But what has been highlighted there is the difference between intent and interpretation, because we see in the political phrase, I'm sure you can pick out which is which. Go ahead.
Despite the fact they might have songs that aren't based politically, I did mention Rape Me in my speech. Do you think that's saying anything?
Well, you just mentioned they've had stuff that isn't entirely political. You just conceded to the opposition. My goodness. Thank you very much. Where is this? And returning to the point of, because I've scattered notes there, and that's the point I know. To really highlight the difference between active politics and alternative culture. For instance, you don't New Labour isn't like Tony Blair, Peter Mandelson, Gordon Brown's grunge rock band, for instance. My Chemical Romance doesn't deal with My Chemical Ghastly. And Joy Division does not devise any tax-free plans. Meanwhile, Midwestern Emo isn't an American voting bloc, and Jerry has never worn eyeshadow. And alt culture, in my eyes, finds, as someone that does engage, I should give context, as someone that does engage with what I would consider politics. I'm a member of the party which I come state, but the intent behind why people go into politics, from speaking to members of my party, and people of other parties who have benefited the society, is that there is a clear intent in activism. People I've spoken to engage in alternative culture, it is escapism. It is fundamentally two different channels. Sure, they may be similar, but it is not inherently one or the other. In that meaning, alternative culture cannot be inherently political. I was going to do a rebuttal, but Tom did not write a speech. I actually have a quote here. I'm just going to do the big people speech, guys. He said that like 5 o'clock this evening. So to end off this, do not listen to me. Listen to a politician. They've got a clear example of how alternative culture is not inherently political. So I beg you all to oppose, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Owen, for that very kind speech. And now to the case proposition that I'd like to invite Thomas to the podium.
I do. I just want to say thank you all. Thank you to the Liberative Society for inviting this alternative society to this collaboration. So, is alternative culture inherently political? That is the question, but what is the answer? So, as chairperson of the Alternative Society, all of you are desperately looking to me for answers, or you're just looking at me thinking, oh, look, that's me, what hat is he wearing? This hat outfit is inherently political. It's based on military goth, which is intended to mock the rigid hierarchy of the military and militarism as a whole. So, in recent years, counterculture music and fashion, or what is now mostly just referred to as alt, as an all-encompassing blanket term to encapsulate varying and sometimes widely different subject matters. So, where did alt subculture come from? It didn't appear out of nowhere. So, it appeared in the 20th century through cultural movements like punk, goth, emo, metal, which came about as a direct response to the oppressive, outside systematic forces that they evolved from. So these outside forces, for example, could be Richard Nixon, the war in Vietnam, or even Thatcher's policies in the United Kingdom. So, firstly, the punk movement came about from the loins of the hippie movement, which, were big into their free love and drugs, which inherently birthed the punk movement, which itself was inherently political, like the movement that it succeeded. So, punks popped up all over the world, mostly at first the United Kingdom and the United States of America. So, it retained its anti-establishment values and anarchic values. It displayed this through bands such as, referred to before, Sex Pistols, which may or may not have criticised, quite obviously, the United Kingdom's governments and systems. So, this punk ideals are still kept up today in such bands such as Green Day. However, some of the fans lack basic media literacy, so as soon as Trump is criticised, they abandon ship, and these hardcore punks just stop supporting Green Day altogether. So, alongside the punk movement, the metalheads came about. While the metalhead is now associated with a certain foul odour and greasy hair and bizarre misogyny for some reason. There was a time when metalhead was actually cool, fought against the system instead of supporting fascism, which surprisingly a lot do. Which isn't great. So, I can go and listen to one of the most popular metal songs, for example, Warpaint by Black Sabbath, I'm sure everyone's heard of it, and go, nah, this isn't political, you're reading too much into it. So, another alternative movement was the Gulf movement, which can actually be traced back to the fall of the Roman Empire. So, in 410, on the 24th of August, 410 AD, 238, the Gothic tribes, which were warring with the Roman Empire, ended up sacking Rome. They broke through the city's defences and established their own empires, creating two main kingdoms, after which were both the Spanish Ostrogothic kingdom and the Visigothic kingdom. So, how can you say that's not political? Literally, the origins of the Gulf movement are political, of the sacking of the greatest empire. Yes?
I'm so sorry. The gods in that specific context do not ascribe to the gods that emerged in the 80s,
Yes,
and 70s, but I see.
Yes, the name came like the... So, the 80s gods were clad in black, hung out in the Bat's cave, and listened to a lot of dark movement that scared their parents and also scared wider society. Their look was a stand against the family values that we used to rely. The movement's political ideology was rooted in its origins as post-punk, anti-authoritarianism, and anti-capitalist subculture. They incorporated inclusive ideals, not turning or shaming people away for being who they are. So, example, they incorporated lots of sexual themes into their clothing, for example. Chokers, BDSM outfits were very popular in these clubs. So every Wednesday night in London, these people could come together to be themselves. However, now the goth movement has resurged through social media, birthing the term TikTok goth, which are controversial in the movement, while some devolve the whole subculture to music and politics. Others still keep to the original values which made up the movement. So, what is being alt about? The answer is honestly to find out what you're mad by and align yourself with like-minded people. I guarantee you there will be plenty of alt types in those groups that can also be introduced to fun parts of the counterculture, the music, the art, and most importantly, the politics. So, overall, you can't be alternative and do your best efforts to blend in with the culture if you intend to blend in with the cohorts and politics of mainstream society. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thomas, for that very fine speech. Now to continue the case for the opposition, and to invite Mark to the podium, please.
First, I'm kind of nervous. When you think of an alternative person, what do you usually think of? It's probably something like dark clothes, big eyeliner, dyed hair, hate, etc., etc. There's a specific expectation that comes with being in an alternative subculture. There's a history behind every choice. There's rights and wrongs within the community. There's a style of music you have to listen to and a set of political beliefs you have to follow. This rejection of conforming to societal expectations is what makes alternative culture a political statement. However, even within the alternative community, there's arguments about whether someone is really alternative if they're just wearing fashion or if they're just listening to a bit too much Pierce the Veil. It's always about how someone isn't political enough to be in the subculture, and as an alternative person myself, it is tiring. If you think about alternative as an entirely political movement, that every outfit you wear, every song that you play, basically everything that you think or say, it takes away from so many other aspects of being in the community. Of course, there are alternative subcultures that are rooted in politics. You've obviously got punk derivatives and goth, among others, and that is usually what you think of when you think of an alternative subculture. But for other subcultures, those that get left in the dark because they don't fit into this mold are those that people argue over if they're really alternative or not. Subculture starts as raver, yari, which we mentioned earlier, decora, even that 2020 alt style that nobody actually has a name for. Should these be put to the sidelines just because they aren't fitting on the stereotypical mold of alternative? At the beginning of my speech, when I mentioned some aspects people think of when they think of an alternative person, how many of you agreed with me? Isn't it a bit weird how we've taken the umbrella of an alternative culture and narrowed it down to a specific set of political beliefs and a look? It's almost hypocritical in a way. A culture that's so focused on defying the norm has created a norm of its own. The standard that alternative has to be political waters down a lot of nuances and individuality in alternative subculture. This might be a bit of a controversial, not controversial, unconventional argument, but you guys know this, the goth kids in South Park. There's like this running joke that they're so non-conformist, they listen to the same music, but they dress in the same clothes and they act the same. As much as this is clearly a joke, it's actually a really good insight into the problem with modern alternative culture and the rules that people have to be followed to be considered alternative. How can a culture so focused on breaking the societal rules and being different manage to fit into the stereotypical societal expectation of what an alternative person should be? There are also huge parts of alternative culture that are tied in with the whole weird kid culture that so many alternative people just throw to the side because they're associated with like the sweaty anime nerds and stuff like that. You have obviously the cosplay community, which is not an inherently political community. It's literally just a bunch of people who really like cosplay characters that they really love. Despite these being parallel or even intertwined with the alternative community, they're almost always reduced down to just weird things, and even things that alternative people themselves push to the side because they don't fit into, like I said, the stereotypical view of a political alternative narrative. To conclude, alternative isn't an inherently political movement. It's experimental, it's messy, but most importantly, it's self-expression. I don't think that in itself is inherently political. And finding a community that you can call home shouldn't be reduced to nothing more than a political statement in an attempt to defy society, because that in itself reduces self-expression to a political movement, and it is so much more than that.
For that very first speech, and now to close the case for proposition, I'd like to invite Maya to the podium, please.
This will be free form. I apologize in advance. I want to talk about oppressive regimes. I, in specific, have a pretty unique perspective, being a second-generation immigrant from Poland. So, as many of you may be aware, Poland fell into the world of the Soviet Union, and as a result of that, a lot of the media consumption, availability of things such as clothing, cars were heavily restricted in Poland. And as a result of that, punk actually ended up sweeping into the nation and emerging as a little bit of a beacon of hope against this regime. So, I believe it actually originated from somebody like trying to hijack like some radio signals and then that broadcast actually some punk music from the Americas, and then that kind of transformed into the in Poland. So, on that point, obviously, Flatland emerged into a certain style, dressing in a particular way, which is unexpected, I say, inherently then criticizes oppressive regimes, oppressive political regimes, such as the Soviet Union, right? And dare I say, despite a lack thereof of oppressive regimes today, or in certain parts of the world, or them just emerging back, wriggling their way back into modern politics, I argue that styles from all across the world that oppose your kind of image of what a regular person looks like. And this actually is, okay?
Hello, do you talk about, people in the land who, like, probably oppose, like, kind of cultural regime that are imposed on people. So, in your opinion, what would be like the most significant band or like group that would be the most like influential and like kind of opposing those kind of issues?
Well, in Poland I have a really good example. So the band Soap became really popular, and they have this particular song which I think is very relevant to this point called Hot Prom, which is literally going against the current, right? So as Marcia actually mentioned about alternative subcultures in Japan, I can bring up a really good example of Lolita, actually, which emerged against Western expectations of women and them being a little bit sexy, and is a kind of escapism, which actually is quite conservative visually, because against, conservative politics, and then their idea of a modern woman, a childbearing woman, etc. And I think, on a closing note, I believe that dressing in that specific way, no matter how much you apply yourself to politics, then could be interpreted as being inherently political. Thank you.
Thank you, Maya, for that very fine speech. And now to close the case for the opposition and the debate as a whole, I would like to invite Tom to the podium, please.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, life is darkness. Life is only pain and suffering. Rachel Reeves put VAT. They're increasing national insurance contribution for employers. Life is darkness. But let me address the elephant in the room. Bigger. It's not a phase. I'm not a poser. I listen to my chemical romance. I listen to Green Day. I listen to The Cure. I listen to Suzanne and the Banshees. So I'm not a poser. I am qualified to speak on this issue. And even if, let's say, I'm a poser, I still have a special affinity towards alternative future.
Would you say that this is a direct response from your failure to cancel?
You didn't have to say that. But I have a special affinity towards alternative people. I have at least one alternative friend. So that uniquely qualifies me to now tell you what alternative culture is. But first, I need to speak on what we brought to you today. Catherine spoke about how there are so many different subcultures that you can't prescribe a specific subculture with certain views. Alt culture cannot exist. You might be able to say alt culture cannot exist without politics, but that's simply not true. Many people do it for the love of the look. Owen brought to you that politics is about lawmaking. When did we see an alternative party? There is a contrast between alternative culture, alternative culture and the general political process. Then Mars brought you that even if subculture there was a viewpoint associated with it, you can dabble into these subcultures without having a political partake in the politics of it. You can't narrow it down to that. So let's juxtapose what we brought to you with our lovely proposition. They did a great job. Ariel.
Hello.
Perhaps I'll do it a different way. So, you all talked about the origins of alternative culture. Kate, you said that something, you said the definition of alternative is something that is different from something else, like English, right? but then you will prescribe an origin point on where alternative culture begins, where its root, and therefore I can describe what it is today. Kate, you gave examples of recent history. Thomas, you talked about Rome for some reason, and then you were about your own team about it. But that goes to show that, based on your definition that you brought to us today, that there is no origin of alternative culture, because it's something that's unique to human culture. Please.
Did it show up? Where did it show up from then? Where did not essentially modern alt, but where did where it obviously derived from punk, did it just turn into
when did something that is derived from something else happen? I would say that is at least antiquity. No, thank you. Oh, right. Thanks. So then we also heard from the propositions. What are alt values? What are they? So we've been told by Harry that it is anti-overconsumerism. We've been told by Kate that it's anti-racism, anti-fascism. But then Thomas mentioned that metalheads and how they have a misogynist, subculture within that. Hang on, these things aren't really consistent. And it makes me realize, it makes me realize that, I've been reliably informed that there's many different types of alternative subcultures, and some of them include skinheads, or even, what was it? Tradwives, which are not consistent with the other ones. They're mutually exclusive. So how can you prescribe a specific alternative values system? So I think that kind of describes why their argument kind of falls apart in that regard. There is no specific alternative value system. So therefore, how could it be inherently one single thing? And then we heard, this is the key fallacy from the proposition today. It's the fallacy of association versus composition. They've brought to you many examples of how this certain group, okay, fine.
Really?
Yes, please.
I'm
trying to.
Anyways, what is your favourite alternative band that you've listened to, Tom?
Green Day. You have this fallacy association with composition. You prescribe these examples of alternative bands and figures and say these guys were political. That means that all of alternative culture is political. But I disagree. Erin, you said where there are protests, all people will be there. Is that exclusive? Will all people be there? Kate, you said that you gave examples of alternative people participating in politics. For example, the Riot Girls. Yes, but will all alternative people participate in politics? Thomas, you said you gave the example of military costs and how they're mocking military rigidity. Is that exclusive to every alternative person? Will every alternative person partake in one of these political messages? I don't think so. I think what Mar said, that there are people might just want to dress a certain way. So this gets to my final point, which is Eric said that people in power don't want you to be it. That but the problem is that people in power want you to be political. They want to belittle what it means to be alt by bringing it into politics. And I say, let alt be what it is. Outside what it is prescribed to be. Outside the boundaries. Outside the shackles of the time limit. Outside the shackles of the oppression of the president. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom, for that very kind speech. And indeed, to all of our members for what's a very interesting and exciting debate. However, the fun is not quite over yet, as we open the floor to questions for either side of our debate tonight, starting with a question for the proposition, if anyone has one.
Okay, yeah, I have a great question.
By the way, sorry, just to.
Oh, wait,
Yeah, but that's a good point for me to explain. So these are opportunities for the members of the House to interrogate you on some of the points you made throughout the debate, and we'll have Ellie ask a question to the proposition.
I suppose you guys don't argue that like alt culture is inherently political. If any of you had to pick like a figure that is like associated with alternative culture, who would it be and why?
Ooh. Hold on a second. I'm gonna say we did revolutions. We did revolutions. I'm gonna say Che.
Take it around and know what God.
Go back and forth. I'm afraid. Is that your answer?
Hold on. Che. I'm gonna sound like a loser. Where's that guy from? Okay. I will choose. Right. This is actually a personal anecdote. Right. Billy Joe Armstrong. Because I spoke about Green Day, and Green Day is one of my favorite bands, and my flatmate Ethan, who decided not to grace us with his presence today, really, he does not like Green Day at all. He really does not like Green Day. And one time we were in HMV and I sent him a photo of my flatmate, who is American, holding a American Idiot vinyl, and he said an American Idiot holding American Idiot. Sorry, I just had to put that on there. Anyways, back to what I was saying. He was like, he doesn't like Green Day because their songs are so like cringe, like in the way that like, and actually now that he says it, like reading like the lyrics of their songs sounds very cringe. But when you think of their popular songs like American Idiot, it's cringe, but it makes sense. It's still relevant today, like especially, I can't remember when it was, but like, do you know how they're like, what is that one part? It's like, I sound like a closer. It's like, there was like, they changed the parts, like, I'm not a part of the MAGA agenda. Like, that's still very relevant. That is a recent thing. So I suppose I don't know.
Yeah, thank you, Kate. And thanks to say good riddance to him. As a response?
As we've outlined, none as alternative culture is not Mary Does.
You sure though?
We'll see.
Okay, thank you, Owen. Then we'll open the floor to a question for the opposition if we have one. Yes, Mark.
This is not a pointed question at all. But Tom, I think the same definition of alt that you've given, would that mean you're alt for being the only one in your data-driven systems group to actually do the work?
That is correct, but I would like to clarify, it's not the definition of alt that I gave, it's the definition of alt that the proposition gave. So that's very important to note.
Thank you, Tom. Response?
Can I actually ask you a question? About your speech, you kind of danced around the motion. It was about alt culture, but you were like, not all alt people, all alt people. Everybody in this room who is alt will be at this. Everybody in alt-soc will be at this tonight. You were kind of dancing around it, being like, but not all alt people will be here. That doesn't mean that's not alt culture, that's alt people.
Yeah, but
people themselves.
I'll allow in this instance.
Yeah, but the problem is that alt people, what we mean by alt people is that people that partake in alt culture. So yes, I am talking about alt culture. I'm just instantiating that to the people. It's it's semantics.
All alt people not being there does not make, because if every alt person in the world is this not essentially an alternative debate on talking about alternative issues? Not every alt person in the world is here right now. Like I feel like it kind of defeats the point. Like the culture itself is political, not the people being there.
What makes up the culture? Is it people?
People make culture, but there are alt people here. There are alt people making the culture here, but not every single alt person has to be present for it to make a culture.
I have a question for the opposition. Right? There was a point being made about skinheads and trad wives, and I have a question about the validity of those as an alternative culture when they are pandering to the conservative ideals of
For the trad wife thing in particular, it's because our framing, which is a big question by the way, our framing is essentially that alternative culture is anything that's out of the norm. Most women today do have jobs and they do work, even conservative women. It is out of the norm for a woman to not work and a woman to do this thing. So she is technically in alternative culture, not by like the normal definition of what you would say is alternative golf, but she's technically living an alternative lifestyle to the rest of society. And skinheads are also alt. They are Nazis, but you know, they do partake in this alternative lifestyle, which is why we frame alternative culture. It's a great question, but you know, that's just the clarification we want to make, because you know, I understand why it's even.
Wouldn't you say that those particular cultures, especially skinhead being ascribed to Nazism, politics, and then trad-wifery being ascribed to, you know, basically, you know, women staying at home and then having lots of children, wouldn't you say that that's kind of pronatalism, which is, again, politics?
That's true, but you know, essentially what I was trying to say, at least in my speech in the field, is that just simply you can partake in culture without the political aspect. Like a lot of the arguments I heard from you guys, which are brilliant, is that it is inherently political because you've got this great, you know, kind of source of politics, right? But you know, we have to remember this motion isn't, you know, punk is inherently political. This motion is alternative culture is inherently political. And my argument was basically you can dabble into these aspects of alternative culture that aren't the politics. Of course, there is this intertwining of politics and alternative people that, you know, that's very important. But you know, we were basically arguing that it's not inherent. I agree with you 100%, that is like a political thing to do, but we're basically just saying, you know, there's ways to make it non-political.
Yeah, so it can be inherently political, and most of the time it's political, but sometimes it cannot be political. Okay, interesting.
Thank you for that discussion, and that leads us on to an abstaining question. So this is a question put evenly to both the proposition and the opposition. As an example, if your question begins, well, this one applies to more to the proposition, or this one applies to more to the opposition, I will bring a whole new meaning to the term metalhead and begin with the threat of my gavel. So, do we have an abstaining question? Yes, Emily.
So, as someone who's raised by like very goth parents who then became less goth as they grew older, you know, would anyone like kind of like dispute the fact that as you grow older, you kind of grow a bit more like, I don't want to say like right wing, but more towards centre right in the political spectrum. If we are like debating the fact that like alternative culture is inherently political, we've heard arguments that it's very left wing, and also kind of like, in terms of skinheads, it can be very like right wing, almost Nazi. Like I just want to know people's like what each side would think of like, okay, even as like someone who identifies alternative, you know, your political views can change, and does that mean you're less alternative? And if so, why?
So what is the relationship between politics and alternative culture?
So it's true that as some people get older, they kind of draw back from that kind of lifestyle, because obviously going to protests or dressing in a particular way can be kind of blocked off by having a job, pursuing an academic career, but I have seen people then go back to an alternative lifestyle once they are in retirement. I've seen a lovely lady with short purple hair and gloves with skulls on her hands in Belfast recently, and I think that's lovely that people kind of tend to go back to what they believe anyway, and I don't think that that's ever, you know, disconnected from their person. I just think that we obviously do change as we grow, but a lot of people who are alternative hold on to that throughout their life regardless.
I believe Thomas's response to that too.
Adding to that, I see so many, most of the pubs I see nowadays are old men in their 60s to 70s, and they still stick to their values they held in the 70s and 60s, which I find quite inspirational.
Thank you, Thomas, and I'll allow you for sake of balance 2 responses from the opposition.
I think just on what you were saying, if we take what it means to be alternative just as a blanket statement, that in itself is, you know, it is being alternate to the wider trend, and if you apply to culture, that applies to being like if culture's going, like if the student culture's going one way, you're going another way. That doesn't necessarily restrict it. If you apply it to politics, which it inherently isn't, but for the sake of this discussion, having there may be circumstances if there is a society in which there are very left-wing, if there's a left-wing kind of like structure where left-wing opinions are agreed by most, then in that context, being conservative would be alternative, which I'm sure Tom feels religiously very happily. So I suppose like if you're analysing this, return to what Emily was saying, if like, it's not only your own viewpoints changing in relation to how alt you are, it's also how society itself is changing as well. So it's again, it is like this motion. It's something we can discuss about a lot, but in relation to what Emily said, inherently is not in relation to this motion. It is inherently not political.
Thank you. Do we have one more response from you?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of respond to your point about the older, more alternative people and stuff who have and also for people who have left it for a while and then come back to it. A lot of the time it is just nostalgia. There's a lot of people who are just nostalgic about their younger years when they were more alternative, and that's why they kind of research to that. I don't even know if that's the right word. They kind of come back to that. It's not. It might not be because of their political stance. It could just be missing how they were in their younger years and stuff like that. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you, Mars. And that very nicely concludes our questions, which brings us on to the verdict of tonight's debate, our vote on speaker ability. Just to establish, you're not voting on which side you personally agree with the most, however you are voting on which side you thought spoke best based on the merits of presentation, rhetoric, argument, teamwork and engagement throughout the debate. So, can I have all those who wish to vote for the proposition on the vote on speaker ability to raise their hands now, please? You can also vote for yourselves, by the way.
Mine counts as an active.
Nice. That is 6, yep. And can I have all those who wish to vote for the opposition on the vote on speaker ability raise your hands now, please?
I think we go.
Yes. And finally, can I have all those who wish to abstain on the vote on speaker ability to raise their hands now, please? 2. Mr. Secretary, can I have the results from the vote on speaker ability, please?
Yes, with 6 votes on the proposition, 7 votes on the opposition, and 1 abstention.
Now, of course, the Grand Campus Tourney is not just about us inviting you here to become members of our society and part of our community. We also love giving other societies the opportunity to tell us a bit about them, and we're incredibly pleased to have had this event in collaboration with the Alternative Society. And thus, I would like to invite our President, Thomas, to give.
On behalf of the Alternative Society, thank you very much for having us, and thank you very much for hosting this event and booking the venue and all. It was fun and a bit stressful, a bit long. I never thought there'd be that much talk on sausage rolls or a Catholic cafe, but it was very fun, and you're all graciously invited to Weatherspoons afterwards. Thank you very much.
Yes, and on the topic of invitations, a few things that we have coming up. So you're of course the last society this semester and this session to compete in the Grand Campus Tourney. We will be presenting the inaugural Divinity Cup at the front of the Lanyon building with the date to be confirmed, so please keep posted on our Instagram for that. That will then be followed by our big picnic social at the end of the year, which will be taking place on the Green of Queens, so please come along to that as well. A really nice way to send off the year, and you're all very much invited. The good news is, as well, that we have another exciting debate coming up in collaboration with the Lit and Deb of Galway and the Philosoph of Cork on the motion, "This House regrets the term West Brit," which myself and Mr. O'Neill will be speaking on. So please, if you'd like to come on ahead and support the society and support us, I would encourage you to come down to that and get in touch with our secretary, Mr. Michael Noble, if you'd like to hear a bit more information. I like to see that Thomas has very much channeled the spirit of our society, and that we're not just a debating society, but very much a social society. So please make sure to join us in Wetherspoons after this debate. And with that, as is tradition, I would like to have all of our excellent speakers to the front. If you could all stay behind the audience cell of the room, I am proud to call the Grand Campus Tourney on the 177th session adjourned.